welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be about the health and care worker visa and what are the eligibility requirements of that visa, and I'm also going to give you the tips and tricks on how to apply that visa. Please note that I am no consultant and I am just making this video based upon my own personal experiences, because I know that people do struggle while applying for the visa, even though it is a very straightforward process and everything is mentioned on their website. But still there are some confusions which I also faced, and I discussed it with my friends and my colleagues who were applying for the same visa, and I read about it on different blogs and different groups, which helped me a lot. And it cleared my confusions, and I successfully got this visa within 2 weeks. So this video is purely based upon my own experience and what I've learned around from my friends and from different groups. And I'm hoping that this video would help you out as well. So please keep watching and do not forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. So what you need to do is you need to open this website, which is their government website, the government.uk, and then when you move down, you can see here there is an option of the visas and immigration, and you need to click on that. And once you click on that, it is going to show you different options. Now, as you are applying, because you need to work in the UK and you're going to make UK as your next professional destination, so you need to apply and work in the UK. And once you do that, it is going to give you different visa options. Now, as I mentioned before about the eligibility criteria, and if you fall into that, you need to apply for the health and care worker visa. And once you go onto the health and care worker visa, they are going to show you all the information, which I told you, and some of that and every other information that you need to know before applying this visa. And now, if you scroll down, there would be a place where it is written how to apply, and it is giving you different options, whether you want to apply from outside UK, or you need to extend your visa, or you need to switch to a different visa. Now, obviously, if it's your first visa and you would be applying from outside the UK, then you need to click from outside the UK. And now it's going to show you the options of applying outside the UK. It's going to give you a list of documents which you will need, the 2 important documents which I've already listed. And there are other documents as well, like the TB clearance certificate, if you're applying from the countries which are on their list from where you need this clearance certificate in order to work in the UK. And also you would need to provide maintenance, like you would need to show a bank statement in case your trust does not tick yes for the maintenance in your certificate of sponsorship. However, so this is a list of the documents. And now when you come down here, just go to apply now. I'm going to look at it side by side and find out the questions which might be confusing, and list them down on the side as well, so you can look at them as well. And I'm also going to talk about them and how you can answer them. So let's go step by step. Initially, they're going to ask you about your personal information, including your email address and everything else, your travel information, like when do you plan to come to UK. So you need to write the exact date. When are you planning to come to the UK? Because the date I mentioned is the date that my entry clearance is valid from. Now, the other thing which they are going to ask you is the ATAS details. And this is also mentioned on your sponsorship certificate that you do not need to obtain the permission from the ATAS. So I just ticked the no. And then they're going to ask you about your name, the family name, and the email address, and everything else. They're going to ask you about your nationality and the date of birth, the place of birth. So they're going to ask everything about that, like where you're currently living and what is the ownership status of your home, whether you rent it out, or whether like it's a rented property, or whether you own it. So you need to answer it according to your own circumstances. And they are going to ask you your contact number as well, and the previous addresses. Now this is important because you need to list down all your previous addresses, like where you've lived, and they ask for the past 2 years. And then they're going to ask you about the passport details and your spouse or partner details if you have ticked that you were married, or obviously it also depends upon your own personal circumstances. And they're also going to ask you about your parent details, and please fill it correctly and do not make mistakes in their names. So once you fill out the application and everything else, just review it once. And then they are going to ask you about the employment, if you have worked in certain jobs. They're going to give you a list of them, and if you have not, then you can simply tick no. I tick no because I did not. And they're going to ask you about the family in the UK. And now the question which we or I was also confused about, whether it would affect the decision of my visa or not. So they basically ask you about your accommodation details, like where are you planning to live in the UK. So this is the thing that obviously we are going there to work, and now this is the time when we are going for a longer period of time. Because initially when I went for the plab part 2 exam, I had already booked my accommodation for a month, and I had just shown the the proof of that. However, this time, as I would need to rent out a property like for a long term, so I do not know where I would live right now. So I just answered that I would be I would be booking an Airbnb, and I would live there for a short term till I find an accommodation to till I find an accommodation where I can live for the long term. So this is what I answered. However, if you have different now after they have asked you about your accommodations details, they would be asking if you have previously used any public funds in the UK. So I did not use any funds. I just ticked no. And after that, they ask you about your indefinite leave to remain, if you have applied that in the past 10 years. I ticked no because I did not. And they would ask you about if you have been to UK before. Then definitely we have been to UK before, because we took the part 2 of plab exam. So this you need to answer carefully. And now when you take that as yes, then they're going to ask you about how many times have you been to UK. Now it depends purely upon you. Like if you have been to UK 1 time, 2 times, depends upon your own circumstances. So I just went there 1 time to take my part 2 exam, and this is what I answered. And when I answered them 1 time, then they asked me if they asked me about the reason for being in the UK. So there was a list of reasons that they gave me. However, taking the exam was not one of them, so I just ticked the box other, and then just provided my details that I traveled to Manchester and on this date, and my exam was booked for this date, and I stayed there for a month. I just wrote the details, and they then would ask you about the date you arrived and the number of days, like or the months that you stayed. It's very simple and straightforward application. So now let's move ahead. After that, they are going to ask you about a few things, that have you breached the visa or have you entered illegally into the UK and things like that. So just read them out carefully and answer that according to your own situation. And then they're going to ask you about the travel history, which is very, very, very important. And I am emphasizing on this, that please open up all your passports, whether you have a new passport and also your old passports, just open them up. And they are going to ask you the history of the previous 10 years. So please fill that out carefully. Look at all the stamps and all the visas that you've got in your passport and then answer it accordingly. In the end of the application, they're going to ask you about the extra information, that if there is something that you need to tell and we're not able to tell in the application. So many people do not fill this. Some do, some do not. And yes, the important thing which they are going to ask initially is the sponsor certificate number or the sponsor license number and things like that, which are already mentioned in your certificate of sponsorship. So be sure to keep that in hand while applying the application, because you will need that information and you would need to enter that. And please, please, please enter all the numbers carefully. Double check them thrice, but enter them carefully. Also, one important question is that they're going to ask you about the English language, whether you are whether you have passed an English language assessment. So they will ask you if you have passed that provided that during the registration. So obviously, when you apply for the GMC registration, you do need the IELTS certificate, and you provide that in order to get registered. And so I answered that yes. And when I was applying for plab Part 2 visit visa application, I also submitted the IELTS certificate. So they're going to ask you if you have submitted the IELTS or your English language competency certificate in the previous application. So I ticked that as yes, because I provided. So this was the application, and as I mentioned, it's pretty straightforward. And if you have any other questions that you need to ask, you could please write them down in the comment box below, and I will just answer them for you. So initially I did mention that I will discuss the amount that you will need to show in case the trust or your employer does not provide maintenance. So I'm also going to put the link down below in the description box. You can look at it yourself as well. So now if the maintenance is not provided at all, or it is not ticked on your certificate of sponsorship, then you need to show 1,270 pounds as per now, in the time I'm making this video, because it might change in the future, you never know. And the application fees is £247 if you're applying for up to 3 years, and if you're applying for more than 3 years, then it is £479 per person. Now that was a maintenance and the application fees. However, you must be wondering what could be the maintenance if you are bringing your spouse or your child with you. So if you are bringing your spouse and the child with you, then they would you would need £285 for your partner and £315 for one child. And if you have additional children, then it would be £200 per child. So you can calculate that and see how much money you'd need. Now let's move on to the important tips and tricks, which I promised I'd give you. So as we've already seen that the visa application is pretty straightforward, and you need to just answer the questions honestly, but please remember, just answer them honestly and review your application so that there are no mistakes. And also please attach a cover letter with your application as well, which which could explain your situation in your home country, or if it can also explain if you are showing a bank statement as a proof of support, and you can also explain that in the cover letter.